Hi everyone, this is me Ivan Verstyuk, and in this episode of my YouTube channel I'm gonna talk about one of the huge problems of the Ukrainian economy, which is unemployment. Unemployment is estimated within the range of 35 to 50%, which means almost half of the nation that used to be 40 million strong now doesn't have a job or doesn't have full employment, and does some sort of volunteering or just has occupation to keep himself or herself busy. With such a vast unemployment, it's extremely hard for the Ukrainian economy to recover from the war challenges. And this is a vicious cycle. Since the Ukrainian economy before the war was driven by the consumer demand, and now with up to 50 Ukrainians who are unemployed, people don't have money to buy things, and so the economy is stalled, and that's a huge problem. The cycle of unemployment is, well, it does look really problematic, because after people lose jobs, they don't start looking for one the next day they get unemployed. They usually take a month or 2 months off to recover emotionally, and then also to live through the war, to take care of the issues that arise during the war. If you live with a family in one of the Ukrainian cities, towns, or villages, and when you go to this website that publishes worst work that you can find, there is not much there. People come up to me daily on the streets of Kiev, Ukraine's capital city, and I talk to them. Most don't have any jobs, especially people aged 50 and older. They can't even think of what kind of employment they could have under current economic situation. With younger Ukrainians, it's a little bit easier, since there are still grocery stores that might be hiring people for really minor jobs, and younger people can go there and get some employment, some work, and get paid by the end of month at least something so they could live. And those who are 45, 50, 55, they have much bigger problems. And this very special phenomenon that we're having is white-collar unemployment. Before the war, Ukrainian white-collar economy used to employ millions of people. And in Kiev and other big Ukrainian cities, white-collar economy was a major employer. It provided jobs for all kinds of analysts, then public relations people, then marketing people, then all kinds of those office workers who were just sitting at their computers doing stuff, sending emails, and checking the news and the information online. And now the white collar economy is disrupted in a very major way. And to be honest, at this point of the war, it's hard to see how the white collar economy will be recovering. And Ukraine hasn't had too many manufacturing jobs before the war, and now we should be starting to create these manufacturing jobs in the manufacturing sector, because those are stable jobs and on a stable ground, and they will be able to keep you afloat, and so you would be able to cover your family's financial needs and cover all your financial obligations. Of course, the Ukrainian government should play its role in providing and creating jobs for the Ukrainians who need them. Sometimes I believe that what kind of economic policy the United States had in the 1930s under the Roosevelt presidency, when he was creating jobs, those could be examples of how Ukraine could act. The Ukrainian government should intervene into the economy to provide jobs. First thing to do would be to talk to the private sector and see where they are, because the private sector has cut all the investments and is not moving anywhere. And without the investments in creating new jobs and new production lines, it's hard to see unemployment diminishing in Ukraine. And the second thing, the government itself should become a major employer through the state-owned companies. Ukraine has up to 3,000 state-owned companies, and they could be doing stuff. There are the big ones like the banks and energy traders who are state-owned and need people. Then there are the gas extraction company, which is pretty big. And the defense production companies, but also the smaller like agriculture companies who are belonging to the government and don't do anything, don't do much, and they could be doing stuff and providing jobs for people in Ukraine's rural regions where they also need employment and salaries and wages. And of course, the other big thing is the employment scheme. Before the war, many employers were skipping under social liabilities to the workers, which was a problem, and you could have spent like 10 years working for a company or organization that wouldn't be paying its share of social payments to the pension fund. In Ukraine, employers have to pay the social tax to the pension fund. So when you retire at age of 60 or 65, you have some money on your account. And here in Ukraine, it's possible that a company employs you and skips on the social liabilities. And after you retire, you don't have anything on your pension account. That's what I have. Like my pension account is pretty much empty, unfortunately. Though I've been working my entire life. My first job, I got it in 1996 when I was 13. I was helping my mom. She was assistant at a liquor store, and I was helping her like hanging beer bottles that she was selling. And since then, I've been working or studying. That's 27 years. And still my pension account is pretty much empty. And I'm not the unique one. Many Ukrainians of my generation have the same problem. Our pension accounts are empty because our employers didn't cover the social liabilities. They were minimizing all of their liabilities, even the tax. So that's the problem. And now we should change this. And the labor code should be implemented in Ukraine, because so far everyone thinks, well, the labor code is something from the Soviet era, and we don't have to to use it and as a guidance in our employment and hiring policy. But that's unsustainable. I mean, we need legal framework that would be protecting the workers from the employers who don't want to pay anything, and the salaries weren't ever in Ukraine very high. Many people couldn't afford very basic things, like paying for their children's education at a university or at a college or at a technical school. They couldn't afford vacations. And that was a huge problem, because with the social media and everything, you can see how the people in developed countries are living, how people are living in the United States, in France, in Germany, in Belgium, in the Netherlands. And you start thinking, why can't we have that type of life in Ukraine? I mean, we're also people, European nation that wants to have a good life and high comfort of life, and we don't have it. Maybe something's wrong with how our labor market operates, how it's based, the principles it works upon, and also how the employers behave. During the COVID-19 crisis, employers pushed workers to the edge. They were demanding that you would work 14 hours a day, sometimes skip on your weekends, because there was so much work to do, and if you don't want to work, you'll get fired in 2 days. And you didn't have much of a choice. You get to adjust to these rules introduced by the employers. But now things are different. People don't want to work these crazy hours just for the sake of employers having a good balance sheet and a good profit by the year's end. That's not how the healthy economy should be organized, and that's a big problem for all of us here in Ukraine. But I'm optimistic because the cabinet of ministers does understand the problems, and I believe it's going to be pushing the employers to be responsible for the workers, pay good wages, good salaries, and also social taxes, so people will have money in their pension accounts after they retire. And also we need to get rid of this ageism where people and employers would hire people who are 50 or older. Those are also very well educated Ukrainians who would be able to to produce the added value and to make their input and contribution into how the Ukrainian economy recovers. We need all people here in Ukraine working, and not just laying on the couch at home all day long with nothing to do and getting bored and getting pessimistic about the world developments. When you have a job, you're usually a much more optimistic person, because you know that you're going to be paid by the end of month, and you may use your money to support the Ukrainian army, make a contribution to the Ukraine's armed forces, so you could buy things, the weapons, the artillery, and fight the war, win the war against the Russian invasion that started in February. Unemployment is the biggest problem of the Ukrainian economy so far. And if you are an economist, please do follow how the Ukrainian labor market is going to be recovering after the war. That's probably the worst employment crisis in Europe in this century. None of the European countries had such a severe and deep and problematic unemployment as Ukraine does now. And we also count on the support of our Western partners, that they will be providing advice and recommendations and suggestions on how the Ukrainian government should tackle the unemployment issue. In the United States, the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of America, it does pay attention to both unemployment and inflation, and with the interest rates adjusting to make the economy sustainable, so people would have jobs and would have cheap loans and mortgages, and also inflation wouldn't be too high. So I believe in Ukraine, the National Bank in Kiev should also be taking care not only about the interest rates and not only about inflation, but also about unemployment. Legally, National Bank is not obliged to take care of unemployment, but this should be changing. The National Bank of Ukraine should be like protector of economic interests of regular people. So far, it looks like a lobbyist of the banking industry. Banking industry has this a big influence on how the central bank in Kiev operates, and this should be changed. The central bank is our institution. We Ukrainian taxpayers, Ukrainian citizens, with our taxes pay salaries to central bank people, and they, in their turn, should be taking care of our best interest, not about the banking industry, which has enough money, which has good capital buffers, and could survive without any easing of the national bank policy. Of course, we have inflation also, and under this very well-known economic rule, the higher inflation is, the lower unemployment should be. But that's not the way it is in Ukraine. We have both high inflation and high unemployment, and being unemployed gets costlier each day, with so many people not able to afford to cover their basic living needs, like renting an apartment or buying groceries. We are heading into a crisis, and it's controversial. We have this very strong Ukrainian army that fights truly heroically in the battlefields and bringing the day of victory closer, while people don't have jobs and they're getting unhappy. That's like black and white. You read the news and how good the Ukrainian army is doing on the battlefields and in the combat zone, and then you start thinking about your own economic future, your own financial insecurity, your lack of feeling of financial stability and predictability and sustainability. And you don't know how this country that has such a strong army and has such an educated society and culturally very sophisticated, it's not able to provide jobs. Something was wrong with the Ukrainian economy before the war, and this very thing remains wrong. We had this post-Soviet capitalism that was pro-employer framework, where the employer was the major force of how the economy was shaped and how it was developing. We need to change it in terms of to create the economy that works for all, not only for the employers. I mean, what's sense for a company to have healthy balance sheet if its employees are not paid well? I mean, what matters more, balance sheet or people's lives? I do believe that people's lives matter much more than your balance sheet, and how many cash you have on your banking account, corporate banking account, and what kinds of interest rates you have on your debt. People's lives and their wages and the comfort of their houses and quality of their real estate matters much more. We want Ukrainians to be rich and happy. They weren't rich and happy before the war, and now after surviving this horrible invasion with thousands of Ukrainians dying, including children who are underage, we need to somehow to compensate Ukrainians for what they survived through, for what they lived through, with all these risks, all this instability, all these problems, and then also injuries. Millions of Ukrainians have health issues and health conditions because the nervous system, for it's hard to live through the war. People can't sleep well, people don't feel well, people have headaches, people have all kinds of health problems, and they need money to treat those problems because healthcare system is not so cheap and affordable in Ukraine. If you need to visit a doctor in a private hospital, it would cost you 30 euros for a 15-minute visit, and your salary is somewhere at like 500 euros. So you see, you can't afford much. And if you have a serious health condition where the price is in the thousands of euros, then there is no way you're going to treat it at a private hospital. Of course, you can go to a state-owned hospital, but there you also have to do payments, certain payments, and also the whole process is much less efficient, takes more time, because too many people go to the state-owned hospitals, and they have to stand in a line before they can see a doctor, and the doctor would treat their health condition and provide suggestions and recommendations on what to do next with your diet, with your way of life, with your habits, which could be healthy or unhealthy. Maybe you should pick up running or some sports, and it will be taken care of how you feel yourself. The poverty is the main reason of why we've been having this war. If Ukraine would be a rich country, Russia wouldn't have invaded. The problem is we didn't have money. The corporate sector did have money but didn't invest in anything. They were just putting their money in their banking accounts and then buying bonds from the Ukrainian finance ministry instead of creating jobs, starting new businesses. That was so controversial and so post-Soviet in a way of how the Ukrainian economy was working. The corporate sector should have been creating jobs and not buying bonds. Of course, Ukrainian bonds pay well because the interest rates are high, and you don't need to do anything to buy a bond. You just you do it with 2 clicks on your computer or even on your phone. That's something that we need to think about. We need an economy that would be a real economy, not like a financial bubble with bonds, people buying and selling bonds. That's not how we're going to get out of poverty. By the end of the day, it's like the added value that we create, our skills that we have, our education that we have, things we're able to do with our heads, our hands, and everything. Before the war, it wasn't popular to get a good education. Most people thought that it's easy to have a job because anyways we were not producing anything complicated in Ukraine. We don't have the microchip industry, we don't have the electric battery industry. We just buy and sell stuff, and for that you don't need like a PhD in physics, right? And you don't need like a MA in philosophy because things are easy in Ukraine. You just do a very simple job while all the corporate executives have their like billions stuffed in government bonds. That was a post-Soviet capitalism that put Ukraine into this poverty, where up to 50% of the population were living in the condition of poverty, total poverty. Not the African style where people starve, But still, that was poverty, where people couldn't afford to go to a vacation for 2 weeks to the mountains to enjoy the views and the sunsets and have a good meal that the locals prepare in their own way. Yes, so many things to think about. So the government should put more public funds into creating jobs through the state-owned companies that we have. 3,000 state-owned companies. They could produce lots of stuff, and people would have jobs and salaries and social protection. That's a huge problem for all of us in Ukraine. I mean, we're gonna win this war, but the unemployment won't go away in a day. We already have to start to work on this and addressing this issue. That's important. Let's work. Let's have faith that we'll win the war, and let's have faith that we will have our economy and the labor market recovered.